Hello and welcome to the Field Arts and Events Hall live stream. Ladies, gentlemen, and otherwise, the live stream will begin in about 5 minutes.
Hello, 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 and good evening. We are just about to start our Irish evening of storytelling. A good St. Patrick's Day to all of you. Thank you so much for coming to Field Arts and Events Hall to be with us this evening from a Field Hall and Story People of Clallam County event. My name is Steve Rader Ginsberg. I'm Executive and Artistic Director of Field Arts and Events Hall. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Can you believe it? We are not quite 3 years old, and we have brought over 129 performances in this last year, and we've had over 250 events in this building just in the last 12 months. So we are doing quite a bit, and hopefully you've been able to enjoy a number of things here. We do recognize that we are situated on the land of the Clallam and Clallam peoples, meaning the strong people who have lived on the Olympic Peninsula for over 10,000 years in a continuous manner, caretaking for this land, which we all live on together now. There's a few things I want to bring your attention to. We dropped a number of flyers on your table. We have a circus tent coming mid-May that we're going to build while we still have the opportunity on the west side of our campus. It's a huge empty gravel lot, which I'm sure you've noticed. So we're putting a big top circus tent. We have 3 family shows, 1 burlesque show for 21 and over. And we have our 3rd annual Field Hall Gala, which will be in this building and in the circus tent. That information is on this postcard. The Marine Discovery Center is going to be breaking ground at the end of the summer, and we are going to have an aquarium on this campus. And we are super excited to fulfill the dream of the Port Angeles Waterfront Center. I want to announce that recently we have just received enough pledges and donations to completely pay for the building project of Field Arts and Events Hall. So now this is complete. It is the largest nonprofit construction project of this century yet so far. And we'll see if anybody outdoes us by the end of the century. So the other thing on the table is, you'll see this talks about our all-in public campaign. We're asking everybody to be all in to finish the campaign. Now that the building has been built, we are a nonprofit 501c3. We have a few mission-based programs that we would love your support for. One of those is called Field Hall for All, and that is we have education programs. We open up this space for and make programs accessible here. We subsidize all tickets, and we do have a financial assistance program so nobody in Clallam County is shut out from participating in any of our cultural events. So take a look at that. Lastly, if you would like any more food or beverage, I do know tonight, this is the first time I've ever had a black and tan. Usually you get those, at the Irish pubs, and we're doing that tonight. So if you want a half Guinness, half Harp, they're making those at the bar. But just put this card up in your holder, and then somebody will come over and help you out. If you need anything during the event, it won't be any problem. So I'm going to bring up Bob Newfer, who is the president of the Story People of Clallam County. Come on up, Bob. Bob will tell you a little bit about the Story People and how tonight came to be and a couple of the next Story People events. Thanks so much for being here. Happy St. Patrick's Day, and we'll see you later.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And it's good to see all of you here. It's fun playing to a full house. It feels like a full house. And as Steve said, I'm Bob Newfer. I'm the president of the Story People of Clallam County. And we, the Story People of Clallam County, is a guild dedicated to bringing all forms of storytelling to the North Olympic Peninsula. Our guild includes both story listeners and storytellers, because you can't have one without the other. That's catchy. It could be included in a song. You'll find information on our website about the things that we do, including our story swaps, as well as concerts several times a year, and some summer events where we share. And our website is Story People of Clallam County. Pretty easy to remember. Please browse our site, contact us if you have any questions or communications. We love to connect with people about stories. We meet once a month on the first Wednesday of the month, 7 o'clock, at the Port Angeles Library. We have a featured teller and a introductory teller, and then we have an open mic. So if you ever felt like you had some storytelling genes and you want to practice with a very kind audience, you could come and sign up for the open mic and share with us a story that you've had tucked away or one that you've been working on, and do that. And we'd love to have you come visit with us. So starting in September, going through June, first Wednesday of each month, 7 o'clock, at the Port Angeles Library in the Raymond Carver Room. And we love to have you come, share stories with us. Now, one other event that we have coming up on June 4th here at Field Hall, we are going to have our Liars Contest. Now, this is something that we've done a number of times. I think this might be the 11th. I've been in every one, and I've won trophies twice. And I got married last year, and the presiding person said to my wife, "Now, you know what you're getting into, marrying a certified liar who has 2 trophies to prove it." But she went ahead anyway and married me, and I am very happy that she did. So I hope that you'll look into things that we do further, because we love to have listeners as well as storytellers. Now, it's my pleasure to introduce Will Hornyak to you tonight. Will is a soulful storyteller, creative teacher, and dynamic performer. He weaves world myths, local tall tales, and original creations into unique, well-crafted, and engaging performances, workshops, and keynotes. A lifelong traveler, he has worked as a newspaperman in South America, a fisherman in Alaska, a carpenter, farmhand, and a university instructor. Stories, poems, and songs of work and labor find common ground with Irish myths, is what we're going to be hearing tonight, Mexican fables, Grimm's fairy tales, and Oregon tall tales. He teaches storytelling and professional communication at Marylhurst University in Portland, Oregon, and performs throughout the United States. There's a lot more I could say about some of the things that Will does, but I'm actually going to invite him to come up, take the stage. You're going to love it. He tells me he's going to begin with a song and end with a song. I said, hey, that's the way to do things in life. Begin with a song, end with a song. Please welcome Will Hornyak.
How you doing? Happy St. Paddy's Day. All right. Now, I always like to do this with the traditional format for an Irish oral recitation. And we always begin with the imbibing of fermented and or distilled beverages. Sláinte to your health. And we proceed with we have a song, we have a couple songs, and then we have a poem, then we have a couple stories, then we have more imbibing of fermented and distilled beverages, and then we finish with fighting, feats of strength, negotiations of refunds, all right? It's always the liveliest part of the evening, right? But first off, I want to thank the Story People of Clallam County for inviting me here. They're such a wonderful group. Can you raise your hand if you're associated with those folks in any way? Let's give them a hand for hosting us here tonight. Thank you. And I want to thank the fine folks here at the Field Arts and Events Center for an incredible job. And my friend Tavis over here is making me sound much better than I've ever sounded before. So for the sound people, thank you very much. So I handed out some song sheets there, and people that know me know that when you sing with me, the only two requirements are number one, volume, and number two, enthusiasm, okay? Because the Irish believe there are very few things that can't be improved with volume and enthusiasm, all right? And if you get confused, sing louder, okay? And nobody will know the difference, all right? So we'll start out with a song called The Star of the County Down. And the chorus is pretty simple. I'll sing it through and you just join me in. So it goes, from Bantry Bay to the Derry Quay, from Galway to Dublin town. Want to try it? From Bantry Bay to the Derry Quay, from Galway to Dublin town. No maid I've seen like the fair Colleen that I met in the county down. No maid I've seen like the fair Colleen that I met in the county down. Good. Drink more, it'll come even easier, okay? So the song goes like so. Oh, one thing you might want to know. A boring green means a grassy tract that runs through the countryside. In Bainbridge town in the county down, one morning last July, down a boring green came a sweet Colleen, and she smiled as she passed me by. She looked so sweet from her two bare feet to the sheen of her nut-brown hair. Such a coaxing elf, I shook myself to make sure I was truly there. From Bantry Bay to the Derry Quay, from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the fair Colleen that I met in the county down. As she onward sped, sure I turned my head, and I felt with a feelin' rare. And I said I, to a passer-by, who's the maid with the nut-brown hair? Well, he smiled at me, and with pride said he, she's a gem of Ireland's crown. Young Rosie McGann from the banks of the Bann, she's the star of the county down. Help me out. From Bantry Bay to the Derry Quay, from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the fair Colleen that I met in the county down. At the autumn fair, she'll be surely there, so I'll come in me Sunday clothes, with my hat cocked right and my shoes shone bright, and a smile for my nut-brown rose. No horse I'll yoke, no pipe I'll smoke, till the rust in me plough turns brown. And a smilin' bride by my own fireside sits the star of the county down. One more time. From Bantry Bay to the Derry Quay, from Galway to Dublin town, no maid I've seen like the fair Colleen that I met in the county down. Give yourselves a hand. Well done. One thing I love about that song is the example it shows of the overarching confidence of men. You know? I mean, here's the star of the county down, obviously one of the most beautiful women in all of Ireland, right? But he thinks if he just shows up in his Sunday clothes, right? And his hat's cocked right, his shoes shone, that should pretty much do it, right? Men, I tell you, what a species. But one thing I forgot to say, first off, I want to welcome all the people that are arriving here on the live stream from all kinds of places. If you could just give them a hand and say hello to them. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And I'm told that if you go on the Facebook page for Field Arts, you can send a link to people and other people can join in if they'd like to. And also, this will be recorded so you can see it or pass it on later if you'd like to do that. One other song I'd like to do, and it's a story song. When Charlie Cromwell, the bloody butcher, came to Ireland in the 1600s, he desecrated, and murdered many of the Irish. And to those that remained, he said, his famous line was, "To hell with the rest of you, or to caw not," which meant this: you could either die by my sword, or you could move to the far west of Ireland, to the province of Connaught, which is a beautiful place. but it's rocky, it's not as fertile, it's a much tougher place to get a living. But many people wanting to survive, they moved from the more fertile areas of Ireland into the wild reaches of Connaught. But as time passed, as generations grew up, it created a problem. There was rarely enough arable soil and rarely enough employment for the young men. And so every springtime, usually April, May, and June, when the rivers had dropped and the roads weren't as muddy, the young men would make the long trek along what was called the Rocky Road to Dublin. They would leave Connaught, and depending on where you were in that big province, it might be a walk of 150 miles. They would go to Dublin, see if they could find employment there. If they couldn't, they would often board a ship to Liverpool to see if they could find employment there. Oftentimes never to return to Ireland, because it's true, as they say, Ireland's greatest export is what? Her people, exactly. It's been going on for a long, long time. And there's also a chorus in this, and I want you to help me out with it. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hump the hare and turn her. Can you try it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hump the hare and turn her. Down the rocky road all the way to Dublin. Down the rocky road all the way to Dublin. Whack falaldi ra. Want to try that? Whack falaldi ra. Whack falaldi ra is Gaelic, and it means whack falaldi ra. I've studied this. I know what I'm talking about here, okay? Okay, so it goes. So imagine this is a story of a young man who's about to leave his home in the province of Connaught. He lives in the village of Toom, and he's putting on a pair of brogues, which is a stout shoe as well as a way of speaking, and it says he has a stout blackthorn, which is a big blackthorn cane, right? It's also a shillelagh in the end, too. And he's going to make the walk all the way to Dublin. In the merry month of June, when first from home I started, I kissed the girls of Toom, left 'em sad and broken-hearted, shook hands with father dear, kissed me darling mother, drank a pint of beer, me tears and grief to smother, then off to reap the corn, leave where I was born, I cut a stout black thorn to banish ghost and goblin, with a pair of brand new brogues rattling o'er the bogs, frightening all the dogs on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her, down the rocky road, all the way to Dublin. Whack falaldi ra, good. At Mullingar that night, I rested limbs so weary, I started by daylight, me spirits bright and airy. I took a drop of the pure to keep me heart from sinking, for that's an Irishman's cure when he's troubled with his thinking. To see the lasses smile, laughing all the while at me comical style, it kept me heart a bubbling. They asked if I was hired, what wages I retired, until I almost tired of the rocky road to Dublin. Help me out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her, down the rocky road, all the way to Dublin. Whack falaldi ra. In Dublin I arrived and thought it was a pity to be so soon deprived of view of that fine city. Then I took a stroll all among the quality. Me bundle it was stole within that neat locality. Inquiring for the rogue, they said, your Connaught brogue, it isn't much in vogue. On the rocky road to Dublin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her, down the rocky road, all the way to Dublin. Whack falaldi ra. Got myself out of that, me spirits never failing. I landed at the quay just as the ship was sailing. The captain to me roared and said that no room had he. But when I jumped aboard, a cabin they found for Paddy. Down among the pigs, I danced a rummy rig and played a hearty jig with the ocean round me bubbling. Off the coast of Holyhead, I wish that I was dead or safely put to bed. On the rocky road to Dublin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, hunt the hare and turn her, down the rocky road, all the way to Dublin. Whack falaldi ra. One more verse. The boys of Liverpool, when at the dock we landed, they called myself a fool till I could no longer stand it. Then poor Erin's Isle they began abusing, me blood began to boil, my temper I was losing. Hurrah, me boys, says I, let my shillelagh fly. Some Galway boys were nigh, and saw I was a hobbling, and with a loud hooray they joined me in the fray. We quickly cleared the way on the rocky road to Dublin. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hunt the hare and turn her down the rocky road all the way to Dublin. Whack for loudy raw, whack for loudy, whack for loudy, whack for loudy raw. Give yourself a hand. Woo! I think we'd all use a drink after that, you know. Thanks for singing along. That's a great Irish song because it starts with a drink and ends with a fight, you know. And at the very end, it's hard to follow the whole story, but at the end what happens is, of course, he gets to Liverpool, and immediately he's being made fun of by the local population there. And he gets into a fight with this shillelagh, and he says some Galway boys were nigh. Galway is a town, big city, in Connaught. And so once they saw he was having a hard time, they joined in the fray. And of course, the Irish, they lose a lot of wars, but they win all the fist fights, you know? So that's what happened in the end. Well, I want to do a poem for you before I get into the story. Now, many of you know when St. Patrick came to Ireland, for a time there was sort of a fusion, a melding of the Druidic religions, kind of an earth-based spirituality, with the more sky-based Christianity. And it was called, sometimes it was called Irish Christianity or Celtic Christianity. But it was kind of a beautiful blending of the two. And this lasted for about a century or more. And then the Roman Orthodoxy found out that the Irish were doing this weird sort of thing, you know, and they stepped in. And they literally took staffs and croziers, bishops' croziers, and they went out to what was considered sacred sites among the Celts. These could be oak groves, it could be a certain marsh, a certain cave, a certain river, and they would do rituals to drive the old gods out, you know, and to rid the world of the ancient ones. But of course, what they did in the end was they just drove them deeper into memory, right? And this is a little poem based on that whole experience. When St. Patrick came to Ireland, with every step he found some god or goddess or some spirit buried in some cave or river or stream or mound. It could be the goddess Danu in Munster's hills, or the Morrigan from her dark cave, legends of Finn McCool upon the Boyne, or Connaught's lusty loin Queen Maeve. Whether it was some ancient hag or solar god, wherever Patrick looked, he beheld a living manuscript, a text of earth and sea and sky, for that was the Celtic holy book. And the poets, they told Patrick stories about the Dagda's cauldron that fed all who came to it, yet was ever full, and how Cuchulainn, the Irish Hercules, battled Fergus for the great white Cooley bull, and how the deathless Tuan Macarel was a man, a stag, a boar, a hawk, a salmon, and a man again around. And they said, he's sort of like your man Jesus, Padraig. You just couldn't keep old Tuan down. You know? And the Celts, they took St. Patrick's teachings and they wove them together into a seamless Celtic knot. And from those two great traditions, a third, Celtic Christianity, it was begot. And for a century or so, it was that way, until the one true God stepped in, or at least the men from Rome who claimed alone to speak for him. And they took staffs and croziers to rid the world of sin, to drive all the gods and goddesses out of every stream and mound and marsh and fen. But of course, what they did was actually to drive them deeper into the landscape, deeper into memory, imagination, heart, and mind, where they remain to this very day far beyond the boundaries of space and time. And you know, when a story is told of them, behold, they rise up from the days of old, And like long-lost beloved kith and kin, they come right down the road to greet us all once again. When a story's told of them, behold, they return from days of old, and they come right back like long-lost beloved kith and kin. They come right down the road, right here and now, to greet us all once again. In honor of the two great spiritual traditions of Ireland. Hallelujah. Did you want to hear a story? Yeah. Finally, I know. Enough of this stuff, Right. So, this is a tale. It's long been a favorite of mine. It would be starting out from the 6th century, but the mythology of it goes far back from that. The First Irishman, the legend of Tuan McCarroll. Part 1. How Finian, the abbot at the monastery of Moville, laid a siege upon the home and the soul of Tuan McCarroll. One of Finian's monks had come to him not long ago, and he said, Finian, it seems that there's a man in our own province by the name of Tuan McCarroll, and he still worships in the ancient ways. He respects neither Sundays or saints' days. He appears not at church. And they say that he's a magician of some kind, a strong and hardy fellow. And Finian the abbot said, well, I will see if I can't magician him. I will test his hardihood. Because such a man as that is an insult to the one true God, as well as to myself. So the next day, Finian, he left the monastery, and you could see him pounding down the track there, making great haste. He had the old coarse linen tunic that all the monks wore, and his was cinched at the waist with a piece of rope. Finian was like a piece of rope. He was taut, he was sturdy, he was sinewy, and there was nothing excessive about him, save for his rather excessive preaching about the one true God. And he arrived at the stronghold of Tuan McCarroll, which was way, way deep in the woods. It was a beautiful home made of timber and stone and earth. And Finian, he knocked on the door, but there was no answer. He knocked again, there was no answer. And finally he called out, he said, Tuan McCarroll, I've come for you, man, with good news of the one true God. I come for the good of your soul, man. Open the door to me. Now, I don't know about yourself, but as for myself, if I knew someone was coming to my home with the conscious intent of doing good for my soul, I would run for my life. Tuan McCarroll simply refused to answer the door. But Finian kept crying out. And finally, Tuan, he opened one of the shutters and he looked down. He had a huge head of dark mane of hair and dark eyes, and his face looked like a stone carving. And he said, Man, quiet now, save your breath now. I've heard of your one true God coming to Ireland, and I welcome your one true God. There's room for many gods here in Ireland. And I will respect your one true God. If you will please respect the two gods that I worship, solitude and silence. Now, goodbye to you, man. And he shuttered the window. Do you think it was that easy to shut Finian up? No. He kept crying out and crying out. But finally, he decided to lay a siege upon the home of Tuan McCarroll. To lay a siege in a very powerful but a peaceful method. He simply sat on Tuan McCarroll's doorstep, and he refused to eat food. Day upon day upon day upon day. And you see, in Ireland, being a hospitable country, there's no sin so great as having a man expire on your doorstep for want of food, But he remained. Every day, Tuan's servants would come and they would say, Tuan, that new druid, that priest, he yet remains. And Tuan would say, don't worry, hunger has a whip, it'll drive him away in time. But Tuan McCarroll didn't know the heart of Finian. For you see, the abbot had long ago decided he would leave the doorstep only in one of two ways. Number one, if Tuan allowed him entry to his house, or if God allowed him entry into the kingdom of heaven. For he was fully prepared to perish right on that doorstep. One night, a storm passed. It was cold, and Tuan looked out, and there was Finian shivering there with snow all over his shoulders, an icicle coming off his nose. And Tuan said, "Oh, no. I can't believe that a man's going to expire on my doorstep simply for want of a conversation with me." And he said, "Let him in, let him in, let him in, let him in." Well, they had to carry him in. And they warmed him up. They gave him to eat. Finian's spirit and frame were as strong as his soul. And in no time at all, he was up. Tuan McCarroll brought him up the stairs to the great room. There was a warming fire, 2 chairs. And it was there that Finian laid a siege upon the soul of Tuan McCarroll, 10 times as strong as he laid upon his home. For he told him of the one true God. And he said, "Tuan McCarroll, his only begotten son came to the earth. He was born in a manger, but beneath a star of wonder. And as he grew in wisdom, his words, they were sweet, they were compassionate, but they burned through the lies of Sadducees and Pharisees. And he taught us all how to love our enemies, not just our friends, for he was a man of great peace. He also healed the sick, he raised the dead, and when he died, he ascended body and soul into the heavens, where he remains to this day at the right hand of his Father, and will come to judge us all in time." Tuan McCarroll, he said, "That is an amazing tale." He said, "I have much to learn from it, and I thank you for telling it to me." For Tuan, he loved knowledge, and he loved a good story, and Finian told it well. And then Finian said, "But Tuan McCarroll, if I'm to assist you in any way, you must tell me your story, who your father was, and how you came to occupy these lands." And Tuan said, "Well, I am indeed Tuan, the son of Carroll, and these are the ancestral lands of my father. But long ago I was also Tuan, the son of Starn, who was the son of Partholon." "You've told me of 2 fathers," Finian said. And Tuan said, "Aye, both are mine." He said, "But the second one, son of Partholon, Tuan Partholon was a son of Noah. He came to Ireland not long after the flood." "I know. I came with him." Finian could feel the hair on his neck stand on end and a chill run down his spine. And he said, "Are you telling me that, man? You came to Ireland with Partholon?" "I am." And I did. And Finian said, "Tell on, man." Part 2. How Tuan McCarroll came to Ireland with Partholon, and how in time he became the sole inhabitant of that island. Tuan looked into the fire, and he seemed to look far beyond it. And when he looked back to Finian, the abbot noticed that Tuan's eyes were like 2 great oceans, with light playing on top an enormous darkness. Tuan said, "There were 24 men and 24 women that came in a ship to Ireland. We were nearly dead at sea so long without water, without food. But one day Partholon, he cried out, 'Look, look, look!' We barely had the strength to pull ourselves up. And that's when I saw light just breaking through dark cloud and shining upon this island. It was like a green jewel in a vast ocean of gray. It was Ireland. And I swear to you, Finian, that island drew us to her. We put foot upon solid ground. We made our way up the streams and the rivers, and never have I known a land so forgiving, so hospitable, so welcoming. And in time, the people of Partholon grew in number, and grew in contentment, and grew in strength. And oh, life was sweet. We were happy. We were so happy." And then what, Tuan? What happened? It came to us like wind over water. It was that fast. It came like a scythe cutting down a field of barley wheat, felling the strongest among us. It was a plague. It was an illness, a sickness so strong it blackened the skin, it bloated the belly, it made the eyes bulge, and the pain of it. I still see my children beseeching me, imploring me, "Father, what is it? Father, make it go." And I couldn't. My wife grasping to me, holding to me, as if holding to me could keep death from pulling her away, but I couldn't. all died. All were taken, save one man. And I was that one man, Finian. I was a lone grave digger in a graveyard, and long did I spend at that task. And Finian said, Tuan McCarroll, you will come to rest in God's heart, man. What did you do then? And Tuan said, what did I do? I trembled. I was terrified. I was so afraid. The wolves came for me, and the wildcats. And I would run often to cave and to covert, climb trees. But in time I learned what a beast surmises to survive. And in time, I could crouch as quietly as a wildcat, and I could leap as quickly. I learned to kill, to tear with hands and teeth, and to happily lap the hot blood of my prey. For 2 10s and 2 years, I lived that way. And then one day I came to a spring, and I looked in and I saw myself. I saw myself in the spring. My God, I was bristled like an old boar, naked as a fish, lean as a stripped bush. And I just laughed at myself. What could I do? I just roared with laughter. And then I wept. All my grief and all my loneliness, I wept. Not long after that, I was walking in the hills, and way in the distance on the ocean, at the horizon, I could see ships. I could see boats coming towards us. And I knew, even from a distance, the shape of the sails. These were the boats of Nemed, who was cousin to me. And I felt a feeling in my breast I hadn't felt in a long time, and that was hope. Just the idea of hearing a human voice, feeling a human heart beating next to mine. And I implored them all to come, to come, to come. I was but a speck, they couldn't see me. But I was so happy. I leapt about like a wild goat. And because I was so happy and anticipated them so much, I didn't want to see the rising of the sea swells. I didn't want to hear the coming of the wind. But by the next morning, a storm had come. A storm like I had never, ever seen, Finian, and never, ever want to see again. It sent out league-long whips of wind, as if they were seeking life to destroy it. I went down to the cliffs, and there were huge waves. The entire ocean was like a moving mountain chain. And I watched the ships now. They would rise up to the crest, slide, tumble over, the sailors, the men and women being tossed out. And then like a giant's hand, the wave would come crashing down upon them. Huge clots of surf came pouring up over the cliffs. It took all my strength, hand over hand, to pull myself up without being blown from the land. And I found a cave and found shelter. But it was the strangest thing. At times I could hear, as if it was whispered to my ear, the cry of some man far out at sea calling out to his God. I could hear some woman screeching for her child. I thought the world would end with that storm, and it pushed me deeper into that cave where I took shelter. I wrapped the blanket of darkness around me, for I was weary of life. And I gave myself into doom. I agreed to whatever it was that would come to me, and I closed my eyes and I slept. Part 3. How the tomb of Tuan McCarroll became the womb to Tuan McCarroll, and how he dreamed himself into another life. Are my story chapters long enough for you, or should I stretch them out a little bit? I'm a storyteller, not a poet, so Tuan, he said to Finian, I was sleeping, but at a certain point, my sleeping became dreaming. I knew not what I was, but I knew that I had a new heart beating inside of me. I had a strength in my limbs that I'd never known before. I wore a crown upon my head. I was regal, I was noble, I was a king of some kind. I was beloved by many. And when I awoke, I was what I had dreamed. I knew not what that was, but as I left the cave, I put a foot down on a flat rock, and it wasn't a foot, it was a hoof. I raised my head, it wore a crown of antlers. For I had come into this world again as a stag of the woods. And Finian said, "But how is such a thing possible?" Antoine said, "I know not, priest. I just know that it was, and I know that it was good. For I breathed in the perfumes of the air like I had never, ever before. I sniffed the grasses and the moss and the trees. Upon this wind there came the tang of the wolf, and I stamped a hoof in that direction. And from that place there came the smell of my own kind, and I belled a song in that direction and heard a sweet reply. And then I bounded up, light as a bird's plume, for there is a grace and a strength in the stag like no other creature. On and on I flew. I ran and ran and ran beneath the wide sky, up to the craggy mountain tops, and I stood there in silence and stillness, the whole living world before me. And all was new. I was new, the sun was new, the sky was new. And then down I bounded into the leafy glens beside the flowing streams, and I found my own kind, and I fell in with them, and I learned with my great horned head to protect us from the wolf and the bear that came, to challenge the bulls of mine own kind, until in time I did become the king, the leader of the stags of Ireland. One day I heard, for it's true what they say, if a leaf falls in the woods, it is the bear that smells it, the hawk that sees it, but it's the stag that hears it. And I heard voices, people speaking. I came to the edge of the woods, and sure enough, some people had survived that storm, and there they were in a field there. And I remembered how I too once spoke words. I too once walked upon 2 legs, not 4. Me, who now wore a thick hide and belled a song into the moonlit skies. It was a good life, Finian. But in time, old age came, and my limbs, they grew weak, and the wolves came after me, and I found my way back to my dreaming cave. And they called out to me. They said, "Skinny stag, come out and be our food." And I said, "I'll come on the morrow, and you can feast upon my beating heart." They howled in delight. But they knew not to come, for I still had a deadly kick left in my hoof, a murderous sweep of my rack. And I slept, Finian, I slept. And I only know this. At a certain point in my dreaming, I had a raging, a ferocity in my heart I'd never known before. I knew I was courageous beyond measure. I was unafraid of life, unafraid of death, for I was a warrior of some kind, a fighter, a champion. I knew not what I was, but when I awoke, I heard the wolves howling, and I went outside and I poked out a head. A tufted, bristled snout with huge curving tusks, for I had come to life again as a boar. And the wolves, they yelped, and I was right after them, for I was a giant for strength and a wildcat for leaping. I tumbled them down cliffs, for there is nothing as courageous, as ferocious, as lusty as the boar. I love that life, Finian. I found mine own kind, and I protected them as well. Even from the bears I protected them. Many a wound I took, many a scar I wore. But though you can wound the boar, he is difficult to kill with that heart of his packed so tightly in all that muscle and bone. I tell you, there was not an oak grove in which we did not forage, in which we did not feast, and in which we did not fight. For to battle and to spar and to mate, that's the pleasure of the boar. At times men would come for us, and I learned to take them as they came hunting for us. I would lead them away on tracks that they knew. I would feign weakness, feign woundedness, and they would follow close behind. And then I would lead them into the woods that I knew, into the woods, into mire and muck and fen and marsh and bog. And only when I knew that they were stuck there and lost, when their dogs were caught in the waxing mist, only then did I return to mine own kind. And in that way was I trusted, respected, and beloved among the boars of Ireland. And one day, I heard the most beautiful singing I'd ever heard. It was the women of the Tua de Danann, the women that were eventually drove into the hollow hills. There were no voices as sweet as theirs, and I crawled and I hid myself in the summer grasses and I listened. And I was sad, for I remembered. I too once sang. I too once sang at the supper table, and women's eyes sometimes brightened when I did that. I sang, me, who now grunted, squealed, ran with a Tuscan herd through the dark woods. But one winter, my eyesight failed me, but my nose was good, and I stiffed my way all the way back with a pelt of snow upon my pelt into the dreaming cave. And I'll tell you, I was glad for sleep, for you might know the life of a warrior is a difficult, long thing. And I slept. And once again, Finian, I gave myself into doom. I said, whatever comes to me, let it come. And I only knew that as I dreamed, I could see as I'd never seen before. I could see vast distances, and no movement escaped my eyes. Somehow I was seer, and I was quick. I was swift somehow, like I'd never been before. And when I left the cave, I left not upon feet or hooves. I left upon wings, for I'd become a hawk of the air. And there is no freedom like that, Finian. Imagine what it is to just stitch through the skies this way and that way, up higher and higher, to break through a dark cloud into the shafts of sunlight. How it was to let the currents of air lift me up and up and up, higher and higher, and then to fold wings and to drop fast as stone. And then hunting through glens, hunting over the land, and then catching and feasting upon prey. I lived at times on the rocky precipices. At times I lived in the ancient arms of oak trees beside the marshes. Many times I flew the length and breadth of Ireland, and I knew her in every wind and in every weather and in all seasons. I lived in joy. I slept in peace. Until more men came to Ireland, and you know, with men come weapons, and with weapons come wars. And I knew these men were my brothers, and so I went to witness their work. I hovered high above battlefield upon battlefield upon battlefield upon battlefield. Every wound taken I saw. Every clash of sword upon shield I heard. The cries of the wounded, the death throes of the men, the corpses lying there in moonlight, the carrion birds working upon the corpses by daylight. I saw and I witnessed and I witnessed and I saw until I could see no more war. For many generations, I lived in that way. My heart, Finian, was so heavy with war. But my wings served me and I flew back to my cave. I wrapped wings around me, and when I slept, the grief of everything I had seen poured through me. And in my dream, it poured into the cave and lifted me up. And then it poured over me. It filled the cave with tears, with water, with grief. But somehow I was unafraid, for when I opened my eyes, I was of the water. I had returned to life again as a salmon of the sea. And I'll tell you something, Finian. I loved all of my lives. The nobility, the grace of a stag, and the lustiness, the ferocity, the courage of a boar. The freedom that is that of a hawk alone. But as a fish, joy lay deeper. Well, for one thing, the simplicity of it. Look, a human being, they have legs and arms, don't they? A stag has legs that have to be tucked in for sleep and untucked for movement. But a fish, look at him. He's all one thing from nose to tail, right? And in one beautiful motion, he swims and turns and moves along. And of course, a human being can fall into a furrow, a stag off a cliff. Even a hawk, wing-weary, weather-beaten, can dash its brains against a cliff. But a fish, well, the watery, soft element holds all the creatures, caresses them, And how I love that. And so it was. With the salmon of Ireland, we left the rivers and swam out into the green and blue latitudes of this world. And the wonders that we saw. The great heaving whales of the deep, the tentacled creatures that would reach out to grab us, but we were too swift. Into the northern climes we swam, where the cold touched our noses and stung. Down deep into the caves where ocean roars to ocean. Out to the outermost rim of the world we swam. The soft waters where currents carried us along. But I'll never forget, Finian, the day an urging came in me like I'd never known, an urging to return to the rivers of Ireland. It was almost like a tether had unfurled and now pulled me tight and started to pull me back. But the journey back was nothing like the journey out. It was like the ocean had turned to stone, and to swim through it was like urging through a rock. One day I knew I wouldn't make it. I felt like the flesh would fall from my bones. But on that day, I'll never forget. It was faint, but it was indistinguishable. It was the taste, the smell of the rivers of Ireland. For you know how it is, the rivers, they send their flavor far out into the ocean, and I tasted it, and when I did, I knew my home, I could smell it. And though it was far away, we swam upon that taste and that flavor and that scent of home. And I tell you, only the unconquerable heart of a salmon could endure that level of trouble and labor and toil. But at last I arrived, 3 parts dead, but triumphant and home. I lay in the nook of a crannied rock to rest and gain my strength, and then I decided to swim as a great fish now, to know every river in Ireland. The Suir and the Nore and the Liffey and the Boyne and the Blackwater, the Shannon, all of them I knew. But as a great fish, I was hunted now. Men came for me with spears and nets, big-beaked birds. They would drop down, seals. They would rise up to take a bite from me. I didn't see him, Finian. It was not far from here. It was on the River Foyle, not far from where we are now. I didn't see him, the fisherman. The king of Carroll himself, he came down to the river. I was sleeping, dozing beneath a shady ledge, so I didn't see as he cast out the net. And I didn't see until it wrapped around me. And then I pulled against it with all the strength I had, for I never, ever wanted to leave that soft, soft water. But up and up he pulled me out, away from water onto the grassy bank. And as he bent down, he smiled and he kindly said, "Let go the stream, O king of the fish. Let go the marsh, O king of the salmon. 'Tis not as bad as you think." He picked me up gently. He put me on his back. And as we walked away from the river, for the last time I heard the song of it, the sound of it, saw the light playing on the water. And as the king of Carroll made his way back to his home, he sang a song of praise to the king of the fish and a song of praise to the rivers. And then he got home and he laid me on the table. And the queen came. And she saw me, she said, "That is a beautiful fish." She said, "That fish is mine." And so it was. I was cooked, I was roasted, and I was eaten. She ate every morsel and bite of me. And the strangest thing, Finian, was in time I realized I was swimming again. It was another sea, but it was much smaller. I was swimming in the womb of the Queen of Carroll. And in time, a flood broke forth from that sea, and I issued forth upon it. Came out as an infant, grew into a boy, that became the man who now stands before you now, Finian. Tuan McCarroll, what an amazing tale, but how could such a thing possibly be true? And Tuan said, "Well, Finian, haven't you told me the tale of a man who was conceived of a virgin, impregnated by a word spoken from an angel into her ear? And didn't he turn water into wine, heal the sick, raise the dead, and he died? Yet he rose, body and soul, into heaven, where he sits to this day at the right hand of God the Father, his only Son. He will come again in time to judge us all. And you're questioning the veracity of my tale, Finian. Well, part 4. The final part. How Finian, the abbot of Moville, and Tuan McCarroll, the druid, disagreed, and how their disagreement entwined and defined Ireland for centuries to come. Finian said, Tuan, how could such a thing possibly be true? And Tuan said, well, I know not how it is true. I only know it was. It did indeed happen to me. And Finian said, but do you see the wisdom here? That at last the Father has delivered me to you, so now I can baptize you, and you can at last be baptized and come home to your true home with the Father in heaven. Well, I am home, Finian. This is my home. 'Tis always been. It will always be. No, you don't understand, Tuan McCarroll. You call it home, this howling wilderness, but your home is spirit, and your true home is in heaven. You're lost, man. Well, Finian, let me tell you something. I was lost many times in many lives, and when I would put my nose to the ground and I could smell it, or as a salmon I could taste it, or as a stag I could hear it. When you speak of your heaven, I smell it not, I taste it not, I see it not, and I say, if you do good, then go there. But who is a man to tell another man what his home is? Or what his God should be, Finian? Tuan McCarroll, you're a hardy man, and I regard you well. But I fear for you, man. I fear for you. For I have told you the greatest story ever told, the one true tale. And my fear is that if you don't allow me to baptize you, you will know doom. Doom? Finian, I'm the foster brother of doom. And by the way, Finian, I believe that wise people have many, many, many stories. And zealots have only one. And that's my fear for you, Finian, is that for your love of the one true tale, you forget all the others that exist. No, man. This is my home. Let doom come, if it comes. And with that, Finian, the abbot of Moville, he bowed his head, and he crossed himself, and he prayed. And Tuan looked out the window at a rising moon behind a spreading oak. In time, the fire went out. The room grew cold, and the two men, they left that room. But the next morning, they parted amicably, for they had respect for one another. Finian, the abbot of Moville, he went back to the monastery, where he no doubt prayed for the soul of Tuan McCarroll for the rest of his days. And he in time did become Saint Finian of Moville. To this day, one of the greatest, most revered and beloved saints in all of Ireland. And Tuan McCarroll, what happened to him, well, nobody really knows what happened to Tuan McCarroll. But sometimes in Ireland, someone will see a hawk flying, and they'll say, look at that. Tuan yet cuts a clean line through the air, doesn't he? Upon hearing a belling of a stag, someone will say, Tuan yet sings sweetly in the woods, doesn't he? Or upon eating a salmon, the taste of Tuan is good in our mouths tonight. Who knows where he is or what he is? He could be alive walking around today. He could be noble, he could be a king. He could be a lowly, itinerant, wandering storyteller for all that matter. But if he was a storyteller, don't you think that all of his stories, just like mine, would finally come to an end? And that's at last where this story has finally come, you know. But the Irish, they'll tell you, there's no such thing as a story without an ear to hear it and a good heart to hold it. And all of you have done all of that. And I thank you for it. And would leave you with a blessing that Finian would have given you, and a blessing Tuan McCarroll might have given you as well. For Tuan might have said, deep peace of the running wave to you, deep peace. Deep peace of the quiet earth to you. Deep peace of the flowing air, and deep peace of the warming, transforming fire. To all of you, deep, deep peace. And Finian, on the great road of life, may it rise to meet you. May the sun be on your faces, and may the wind be at your back. And may each and all and every one of you be in heaven at least an hour before the bloody devil knows you're dead. Thank you for helping me bring Tuan McCarroll and Finian to life. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That is a story. The primary text that I use is from a man named James Stephens, S-T-E-P-H-E-N-S. James Stephens was a friend and a contemporary of James Joyce. And some of what I've read said that James Joyce said if any of his works were unfinished, give them to James Stephens to finish them. They were very different. James Stephens tended to work more in traditional Irish myth, fairy tale, and legend, whereas Joyce created his own kind of mythology. But the book, Irish Fairy Tales, by James Stephens, is where this story of Tuan McCarroll is featured. So that was written, but it's a very old myth about druids and shape-shifting. It goes back long, long through time. One of the reasons I like it is because I was raised Catholic. I went to 8 years of Catholic grade school, 4 years of Jesuit education, 4 years of Jesuit university, you know. So I definitely respect the two traditions. I think I had a pagan foundation upon which Catholicism was put, but that conversation and those two traditions continue to have a conversation in me, which is one of the reasons why I love the story. So, I have a short story to finish. You got about 5 minutes left in you? Are you sure? Okay. Thank you. You're a great audience, and I tell you, I always think when I'm telling a story that it's something that we're creating together. I'm saying the words, but the real work is going on in your imagination, so I appreciate that. And also, feel free, if you want to get up and refresh your drink, you know, it's a casual atmosphere, so feel free to do that. So I'm going to tell one final tale, then we'll finish with a sad farewell song. Okay? Before the Celts came to Ireland, we often think of Ireland as the Celtic land, and it was. But people were in Ireland for 10,000 years. We visited, my wife and I visited New Grange, which is the great tomb, and also it's part of a calendar science, but it was built, say, 5,000 years ago. So people have been in Ireland for a long, long time. Before the Celts, there was a group there called the Tuatha De Danann, which means the people that worship the goddess Danu. They were considered especially good with poetry, song, music. Eventually, when they were defeated by the Celts, they supposedly were the ones that went into the Hollow Hills and became what we call today the fairy folk, or the wee folk. You know? And this is a story about the coming of the Tuatha De Danann. Long ago, the Tuatha De Danann arrived in Ireland, and they came in their favorite mode of transportation, a cloud. They just arrived in mists off the sea. And among them, there was a great chieftain his name was the Dagda. And the Dagda, he was considered the good father, the all-father. He wasn't perfect, but he was good at much of what he did. He loved to eat. He had a big appetite. And because of that, he learned to cook. And he brought with him a cauldron. And the Dagda was always cutting up food and making stews and soups and stuff. And whenever he'd be stirring it up, and the winds would come, and they would blow the scent of it here and there, and people would say, the Dagda's cooking. Yeah, let's go. And people would come from everywhere. Whoever came to the Dagda's home were always fed their fill. And they say that it tended to satisfy the oldest, deepest hunger. And then the magical thing was that even though he fed everybody that came to it, the cauldron always brimmed full again. So that was the spirit of the Dagda. At times he would empty the cauldron of food, and he would fill it with spring water from 10 different springs. And it would become a healing cauldron. And whoever had a wound, an affliction, an ailment would be bathed in the cauldron and healed again. The second thing he brought was a huge club. That was a weapon. And most men in those days, they used spears and swords, but the Dagda was old school, you know. Back then, they just called it school. It was so old, you know. Who writes this stuff, I'll tell you. Anyway, they say that the Dagda, when he had the club, with one swing of it, he could smite 9 warriors. But the other end of the club had a healing sprig of hazel that grew out of it. And with that end, he could bring people back to life. Because he used to say, isn't it better to know how to mend a wound rather than how to inflict one? Because isn't that easily enough done? The third thing he brought to Ireland was this huge, beautiful harp. It was a steel-stringed harp, or a metal-stringed harp, and it was made of oak, and it was called Una. And the Dagda could play it so beautifully, they say it could inspire any emotion. It could assuage the deepest grief, and it helped the seasons to move along as they should. And only the Dagda had the strength and the wherewithal to play it. Now, the problem was the Tuatha had enemies. They were known as the Fomorians. You want to try that? The Fomorians. Good. And they were formidable people, right? Very powerful. And of course, they looked upon the Tuatha, because they were the first ones in Ireland, they looked upon the Tuatha as immigrants, you know. Ah, look at the Tuatha there. Taking our good Fomorian jobs, aren't they? Taking our Fomorian social services, you know. Some things never change. But anyway, they would entice the Tuatha into battles. They were always fighting with them. And then they found out about this harp, Una. And they decided, we have to get that harp. If we had that harp, we could inspire any emotion. We could make the seasons move in whatever direction and when we wanted to. And so they enticed the Tuatha into a battle, and the Fomorians kept falling back, giving the Tuatha the idea that they were winning. But in fact, the Fomorians, they sent warriors behind the scenes, and they captured Una the harp. They stole it and they took it. And when the Dagda and the others returned, he was beside himself. And the Dagda said, I can't be who I am without that harp. We as a people can't be who we are without that harp. We need to get it. We need to get it now. Well, it was pitch dark out, you know. They've been fighting all day. But the Dagda said, who will go with me? Who will go with me now? They were as silent then as we are now here, you know. Until this huge arm went up way in back. It was a huge arm. It was a huge arm, in fact, because it belonged to Lou of the long arm, right? And they called him that because he had what? Ah, you're listening here. That's good. It's just my way of keeping you awake here, you know. Lou with the long arm. But with that long arm, he could cast a spear farther, faster, and with greater accuracy than anyone of the Tuatha. And then another arm went up way in back, and that belonged to Angus Og the Artificer. You want to try that one? Angus Og the Artificer. And Angus Og the Artificer, he was kind of like the MacGyver of his day, you know, sort of like a Leonardo da Vinci, a Daedalus. He could make anything out of nothing in no time whatsoever. You know, a handyman to have along. So the three of them set off in the darkness. And this is Ireland. So they got to go through hills and valleys and through woods, you know. They got to ford streams and go along the sides of marshes. And then finally they come up a rise. And the Dagda said, there it is, there it is, there it is. They could see a faint light coming from the big Dun Fort, which is kind of a fort built into the side of a hill. And they knew that's where the Fomorians were. And they crept up upon it. And they could hear the Fomorian warriors snoring, because they were incredible snorers. Can you try it with me? They all had sleep apnea. It was terrible. But it allowed the Dagda and the two others to come in, and the Dagda looked through the window. He said, no, 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 no. They had taken the harp, Una. They had taken it, and they had pinned it to the wall like it was the head of a trophy stag, you know. They had tethered it to these outcropping rocks. And the Dagda, he looked up and he just longed for the harp. He said, Una, Una. And the harp longed for him because only the Dagda could play it. And this amazing thing happened. The harp itself came to life, and it pulled itself away. It was an amazing sight. You could see it floating through the air above the snoring Fomorians there, you know. But as the air crossed over the strings of the harp, it began to play music. And of course, the Fomorian warriors, they heard that, right? Just as the harp came into the arms of the Dagda, the Fomorians, they were up, fully armed now, sword, shield, spear. And it was then that Lou of the Long Arm, who was very perceptive, he said, Dagda, I couldn't be happier that you and your harp have been reunited. But I think our little victory here, as well as our lives, might be a little bit short-lived. And the dog said, he said, I see what you're saying there, Lou. Indeed, there is nothing quite so formidable as a Fomorian warrior coming right at you with fire in their eyes, isn't there? And he said, but Lou of the Long Arm, there's one thing I want you to know, and I want you to never, ever forget it. The power of the Fomorians is great, and the power of the Tua is as well. And just like that, he plucked the harp, and out of it came a sound, a wall of music so profound, so rich, so thick. The Fomorian warriors, they crashed into it. But the nature of that music was so sweet, it was so mirthful, it was so playful. They couldn't help themselves. They dropped their weapons and they began to dance around and just play like 10-year-old boys, you know. They remembered every sweet thing that ever happened to them. They were having so much fun just dancing around and playing. It was lovely to see, but the tune came to an end, and they renewed their charge. But the Dagda plucked the harp again. And this time, it was equally powerful, the sound, but it was so sad. It was so filled with grief and mourning. And you know how grief slows us down. And these warriors, they hit that wall of grief, and they remembered every wound they'd taken, every wound they'd given. And they started to feel the tears and the grief in the world, and they just laid down and began to weep. But that tune, like all tunes, it finally came to an end. And once again, they remembered, and they gathered up their arms, and they renewed their charge. But this time, the Dagda, when he played, it was a lullaby. It was a song so sweet, so sleep-inducing, that in no time at all, they just lay down and went to sleep. I mean, wouldn't you be a little tired after a day of fighting and all that playing and all that grieving? They were exhausted. And now they were sleeping so deeply, the three knew that they had him now. And so it was, Angus Og the artificer, he unsheathed his razor-sharp sword. And Lou of the Long Arm, he took the spear. And the Dagda, he took that huge club of his and he put it on his shoulder. And he said, boys, let's just let him sleep. Let's just let him sleep. Maybe they'll dream a dream of a time when the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians can meet somewhere other than a field of battle. Boys, let's just let him sleep. And so they did. They left him sleeping peacefully. They went all the way back, and the Dagda told all the people the story that I've just told you. And in the end, he said, so remember, the power of the Fomorians, it is great, but the power of the Tuatha, it is great as well. I don't know. That's what the Dagda said. But I'm thinking if he doesn't know, who bloody well does? And that's the story. Thank you. Thank you. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming. I want to thank all the folks that have tuned in from far away for joining us for St. Patrick's Day. And all my hosts to make this evening possible. I want to thank two people in particular. Christy Wright, who took care of a lot of the details, has always been an inspiration in the Clallam storytelling group. And also my good friend Eran Sharp, who has invited me here time and again. So thank you to those two. We finish with a farewell song. It's called The Parting Glass. Many of you know it. And we sing it at all kinds of partings, whether it's the parting of a pub or they sing it at funerals too. But it's on your song sheet there too. And it goes like so. Of all the money that e'er I had, I spent it in good company, and all the harm that e'er I done, alas, it was to none but me. And all I've done for want of wit, to memory now I can't recall. So fill to me the parting glass. Good night and joy be with you all. Of all the comrades that e'er I had, they're sorry for my going away. And all the sweethearts that e'er I had, with a couple notable exceptions, they'd wish me one more day to stay. But since it falls unto my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call, good night and joy be to you all. Good night and joy be to you all. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thanks for coming, everybody. Sláinte. Thank you. Did you want to hear the 2-minute story before you go? All right, I thought. It's only 2 minutes. If it's 4, I'd be surprised. If I'm still talking at 7, just pull me off of here, okay? No, this is my absolute last story. It's a story about a couple of, well, first off, there's a saying in Ireland that a writer is a failed conversationalist. Okay? Yeah. And this is a story about a man who probably should have been a writer. He wasn't much of a conversationalist. It's a story of 2 men. They were neighbors. They had adjoining farms, Pat McCarthy and Mike Flaherty, and they always helped one another out. One day, Pat had to go to Dublin. He was gone for 3 months. He had an uncle who was ill, and he went to care for him. But his uncle finally passed, and you could see now Pat made his way by rail all the way back to the little railway station there. And this is the old days. And there was Mike in the trap, the buggy, you know, with a horse. And you could see the 2 men making their way from the railway station all the way back to Pat's farm. It was a long ride, and Pat, he turned to Mike and said, Mike, these months that I've been gone now, what's been the news? And Mike said, there hasn't been any news. Well, Mike, I've been gone for 4 months. Certainly something must have happened, you know. No, nothing. Well, not since your dog died anyway. He says, oh, that's a shame. Well, how did the dog die? Well, I'm not certain. It might have been the burnt horse flesh when the barn burned down. You know, he was chewing on some of that. Said, my barn burned down. Well, clean to the stones. You could see it for miles. Well, Jesus, Mike, the barn, well, how did that happen? Well, I'm not certain, but I imagine. It was a windy night that night, so probably sparks from the house. You know, they blew over and caught the barn on fire. My house was on fire. Well, it was. It's not any longer. It burned to the ground along with your barn. Says Jesus, the house burned down. Well, Mike, how did that happen? Now that I can tell you. In fact, wasn't I warning them all that night? Oh, I was. I was saying you shouldn't light all these candles in a wood frame house. It's dangerous. They can catch the drapes on fire. But oh, no, they said to me, they said, Mike, you have to have candles around the coffin. It's customary at a wake, you know. Where they caught the drape, wait, a coffin. Someone died? Well, I'm afraid it was your poor mother-in-law that took sick and died. My poor, nothing could have killed her. How did she die? Well, I'm not certain, Pat, but I'm assuming heart attack. I think, you know, just the shock of seeing your wife run off with that young priest, Father Kelly. You know? I never trusted him at all. I never did, Pat. My wife ran off with a priest. My mother-in-law's dead. My house is burned to the ground and the barn. Horses have been killed. And you say there hasn't been any news. Oh, no. Like I said, Pat, not since the dog died. Sorry about that. Sláinte. Oh. My shameless advertisement. I have a poetry book for sale here. It's 21 poems. Somebody told me it's a great way to get to know you, Will, without having to talk to you. So the other thing is I'm doing one more show up in the Olympic Peninsula at the Palindrome Center. It's part of a winery over there in Port Townsend. That's going to be Saturday at 2 p.m., and it's just pay at the door. If you have any friends in Port Townsend or you'd like to come, it will be a similar show, but please let people know. I'd appreciate it. Thanks so much, everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks again, Will. Thanks again to the partnership with Story People. Just to let you know, we're going to turn on some Irish house music. We'll stay open for a little bit because it's so great to be able to catch up with friends and see each other. So don't feel we're not going to kick you out, but go when you want to go. All right, enjoy. Thank you.